Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Art of Me Power and Community podcast, brought to you by Art of Me. We are a nonprofit organization that works with young people to share their stories and perspectives through writing, art, and film. Today, we're going to focus on a very important subject with an amazing person by the name of AKeem Rollins. AKeem is a spoken word artist and a PrEP navigator for the infectious disease department at MetroHealth. Welcome, AKeem.
Hello, thank you for having me so much.
Thank you for being here with us. As you know, Art of Me has taken on the mission of educating communities about HIV and AIDS. Recently, we really want to get the information out there to communities who do not have access to it, and also just people who don't know, don't understand, inviting them into this space to get knowledge about it. Today, we're going to be focused on the basic 101 understanding of HIV and AIDS. We kind of want to ask AKeem the questions that we don't know and don't understand as people who just have zero, we just have zero concept of what HIV and AIDS is outside of stigmas and stereotypes. We invited AKeem on the podcast to just dive into that, and hopefully everyone who's listening in will walk away with a more informed understanding of what HIV and AIDS is, the culture, the community, the people who help and assist in that community. We're also going to continue on next week with more healthcare providers and individuals who also are informed, that will give us just more information on HIV and AIDS. Again, welcome, AKeem.
Thank you. Let's dive right in.
Let's dive right in. So I sent AKeem a couple questions. Not why I say a couple, it's not it's not 10 plus questions.
Send me a whole 50 Cent song.
I did. And you know what, AKeem, while I was at home.
One second. There's someone at my door.
Okay, yeah, let's
give me
pause
1
for a second.
second. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. So as I was saying, I sent AKeem 20 plus questions. I was so nervous to do this. And I told you that I felt like, oh man, I'm walking into waters that I don't understand. But I'm glad that I don't know a lot, because I think then other people don't have to feel weird about the questions that I'm going to ask. And they can kind of get those basic understandings answered as well.
Yeah.
So let's just hop off with the first question. Very basic. Can you just tell us the difference between HIV and AIDS? I will be honest and say I did not know there was a difference, which looking back, it's like, okay, there are two different acronyms. Come on now. Why would it be the same? But could you go ahead and let us know the difference?
Absolutely. So HIV is the human immunodeficiency virus. It's a virus, the virus that causes AIDS. AIDS is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Now, you have to have HIV before you have AIDS, but you can't have AIDS without having HIV first. There are some people who don't ever go from having HIV to having AIDS. And having AIDS is a specific medical diagnosis. So if your T cells drop below 250 and that means your immune system is so damaged that you now have the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. If it can also be medically diagnosed if you have certain opportunistic infections like Parkosi's sarcoma, and other medical things that people who have HIV/AIDS generally get that aren't seen in the general population.
What are T cells? I've never heard of that before.
T cells are the white blood cells in our bodies that build our immune system. They essentially go around the bloodstream and they fight off viruses, bacteria, infections. Most of us we have between 800 to 1400 T cells. That's a healthy adult. And having those in your body is what helps you not even realize that you've gotten a certain bacteria or an infection got into your body, because the body is very efficient at fighting many, many different kinds of viruses, bacterias, infections, and so on. The body can fight HIV, it's just not very efficient at doing so and can become quickly overwhelmed.
Which then will result in the T cells being below the count that they need to be to
Mhm.
fight it off. Okay.
HIV is especially insidious because it uses the T cells to replicate itself. So it goes and attaches to a CD4 or one of the receptors on the outside of the cell, inserts its RNA, unwinds the DNA in the white blood cell. Its RNA goes in, rewinds it, and then it makes so many copies of itself, the cell bursts. And then it continues doing that over and over again.
I just want to say you explained that so well because I literally had a movie going in my head. Like if
Yeah.
you ever if you've ever seen the pictures of if you've ever seen pictures of what a cell looks like, those little like crisscross kind of thingy things. Um
The DNA strand.
yeah, the
Hmm.
strands. I literally in my head was just like, "Oh, okay. You explained that so well." I just want to say if
Thank
nobody's
you.
told you you're great at your job, nobody if nobody's
Well,
if
it never
nobody's
hurts
told
to hear it again.
yeah, no problem. Okay, can you let us know where is HIV found? Like, where do they go to find that a person is has HIV?
Well, HIV is in five bodily fluids. It's in blood, which is where you get your primary test. Blood, vaginal secretions, semen, breast milk, and anal secretions. Yes, human beings have anal secretions. So that's where HIV can be found, where enough of it or the environment is hospitable enough. Think opaque fluids. If you filled up a glass bottle with that fluid, could you see through it? If it's cloudy or you can't really see through, then HIV, that's a good home for HIV. If you can see through it, like tears, sweat, saliva, urine, those are all fluids that generally you can see through. HIV can't survive in those environments. Um, HIV has a very hard time in saliva because we have enzymes in our mouth that break down food, but it can also break down viruses like HIV.
Wow, I honestly did not know that. I did not. And I think again, you're great at your job because you really broke that down. If you can't see through the secretion, then that is a place where HIV would be found. But if you can see through it, which is are these very basic things that happen to us that unfortunately people use to say, "Oh, I can't be around that person who might be infected with HIV or AIDS," like sweat, like spit, like all of these very basic things that people use to push stereotypes.
Hmm.
I'm just I keep saying wow because I didn't know that. So I'm just like, okay, okay, Shonda,
I never
educate.
get tired of hearing that. It makes me feel like my job is so worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, it really it breaks down those fears, which is the whole point of why we're doing this podcast. Just unnecessary fear and
Hmm.
misinformation that not only makes life hard for people who are infected with HIV and AIDS, but also we get to stay in ignorance, which is also
Yeah.
not great for us or our communities or people around us. So
Speaking of
100%.
misinformation, one of my favorite things is because science hates a zero. And so I like to ask people, providers, professionals, and students, how much saliva has to be present? Because we say, you can't get it from saliva, but science doesn't like zeros or can'ts. How much saliva has to be present for a person to be at risk? Do you have a wild guess?
Am I supposed to like guess in ounces or something?
You can guess in whatever measurement you like.
um, I'll say two, 2 cups of saliva.
A lot of people say a bathtub full, but the specific measurement is at least 16 gallons of saliva has to be present. And in a person that produces saliva pretty regularly, that's a little over 4 months worth of saliva.
Wow.
That has to
Wow.
be present. So that's why we say you can't get it from saliva unless you are ingesting 16 gallons of. I can't get 16 gallons of anything down, nothing. But 16 gallons of saliva, that's how much has to be present for you to be at risk of contracting HIV. Not even a 100% chance, just for the risk to be high enough.
Wow. Again, breaks down so much of that. Like, I'm just gonna be open. Like, people are very ignorant, you know what I'm saying? Don't touch me,
Hmm.
don't stand near me, things like that. And it's just like, dude, even if we were to use saliva as an example, which is not one of the main sources of where HIV and AIDS resides, learned that today. Even if we were to use saliva, it would have to be 16 gallons. I mean, that's quite a bit. I mean, that answers one of the questions that I had. If your partner has HIV and AIDS, could you get it from just kissing them? Do you need to expound on that, or does that pretty much answer?
Oh, I can go a little bit deeper with that. There are certain activities that are like green light, yellow light, and red light. Kissing is a green light activity unless you both have open sores in your mouth, which would then make it blood to blood contact. So, for example, if you have really bad gingivitis where your gums are constantly bleeding and open, and the person you're kissing has really bad gingivitis where their gums are constantly bleeding and open, and one of you has HIV, then there is a chance there. But there has to be that fluid exchange. You have to get some of that fluid from their body into your body. Otherwise, kissing is perfectly fine to do. Kissing, drinking after. I mean, I don't recommend drinking after because my mother was very nice nasty and she told me not to drink after other people. But you can drink, you can use the same cup, you can eat off the same plate, you can hug, you can use the same toilet. um a person with HIV, you can't get HIV from being spat on. um, their HIV is a very fragile virus, and it needs specific conditions to be all right in order to survive and transmit. And it also has to have enough of it in whatever fluid for the person to get it. So even if you are having unprotected sex, if the person does not, for example, if you're with someone who's HIV positive, if they don't have enough of the virus present in those fluids, then your chances of getting it are very low. There's this thing called U equals U, undetectable equals untransmittable. If a person who has been who is HIV positive has been in treatment for 6 months and they maintain an undetectable status, which means that a blood test can't pick the virus up in their body, then they can't sexually transmit HIV to anyone as long as they remain undetectable. That is one of our things we call treatment as prevention. um, Getting people who have HIV into treatment and keeping them undetectable, there's no way that they're passing HIV over to someone else. And that's why there are people who are HIV positive who have negative partners who stay negative and they can have children.
So it seems that we have advanced a lot. So, like, our knowledge
Mhm.
about the our knowledge about the topic has to advance. I mean, even just understanding, like you said, being undetectable allows you to just, I don't, is it rude to use the word like normal life? Is that offensive to say?
Well, I mean, it just depends on what normal means.
Right. Well, to live a life, well, you would still be infected with HIV and AIDS, but just to live a life where that doesn't stop you from being in love, it does not stop you from
Mhm.
expressing yourself sexually, it does not stop you from having children. Like, we have advanced to that. Um,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. People can live, have all the typical things that a person who is not positive has. You can have love, children. You can go out to eat. You can still have sex. You can do all of the things that you were doing before you found out you're HIV positive. Just make sure you take care of yourself.
I mean, that's amazing. I think that's amazing because honestly, looking outside in, like as a person standing outside looking in, I'm always like, man, that would be so. I mean, obviously, it's detrimental if it happens to anybody because nobody wants
Mhm.
to be sick. But to it kind of takes the grief out of it a little bit. For like, obviously you have to walk through the phases of like understanding, like, hey, I'm diagnosed with that, what does this mean? Like, you got to go through, emotional health, physical health, and all of that. But I'm just to see that there is some light at the end of the tunnel for people to, like I said, still just strive and exist and live a full life is
Mhm.
freaking amazing, freaking
Yeah.
amazing, and such good news. I guess like my next question would be like, for a person who's diagnosed with HIV and AIDS, what are the symptoms and how long does it take for somebody to understand that they have HIV or AIDS? Like, for example, you said you cannot have AIDS without having first having HIV, right?
Hmm.
So then there's a difference in the symptoms in how long they
Well,
transpire.
here's the fun thing about all STIs. The most common symptom of every STI is no symptoms, which is why it's important to get tested. You could have gonorrhea, herpes, chlamydia, trichomoniasis, HPV, and not have a symptom. Not everyone has symptoms, and not every bacterial or viral infection is going to show symptoms. But with HIV, there are some symptoms that show up, but not often. When a person is seroconverting, that means they are going from being negative to being positive, or the HIV is now infecting their body. They can have what we call like seroconversion sickness, or retroviral sickness. Um, and that really just looks like flu-like symptoms, but it's a hallmark of a rash that comes around or across the chest. That doesn't happen very often. Um, so a person can have HIV for many years. A person can have HIV for 10 to 20 years before it ever turns into uh, a symptomatic HIV. Um, and a person can also have HIV for many years before it turns into AIDS. There are some people, especially back in the early 90s when we were still trying to get the information, who were, the doctor said they were walking around with the same 4 T cells and not having any symptoms, not being sick. There are some people who don't. And there are some people who get very, very ill, and a lot of opportunistic infections. And opportunistic infection is just the a bacteria or a virus. A foreign body has the opportunity to then do something to your body that a normal immune system would fight off pretty easily. There are certain kinds of cancers like that as well. Um, so there aren't symptoms, a way that you can just look at someone and tell, oh, this is HIV, or this is how HIV is showing up. Sometimes people have like a cough or a cold that they just can't shake, and that's showing that the immune system has been damaged so much that it's unable to fight off things like a regular cold or something that appears like a cold. um, but the most important thing is to remember that there aren't standardized symptoms, and that you should always go and get tested just as a standard practice. If you're very sexually active, I would say every 3 months. If you're less sexually active, every 3 to 6 months. If you are in a relationship that is monogamous, then and your person is HIV negative, you don't necessarily have to get tested every so regularly, but once a year would be good too, just to make sure, just to be sure. Um, and people, we have different standards of relationships now too. There's polyamory, there are open relationships and things like that. So the thing is, always think prevention, pre- uh, prevention to regret later on.
I just think it's so amazing, like what you're saying, because can we just talk stigmas on television for a second?
Yeah.
Every time that I've seen a character in a drama or something who have HIV or AIDS, which you don't see it often. So let's talk about lack of representation, firstly.
Mhm.
And then secondly, when you see it though, dude, they're always like, there's a pill case, they're popping pills, they have the chills, they're shaking, they're looking very pale in the face.
Mhm.
And like what you're saying is that's not even a reality for everybody who experiences HIV and AIDS. Like you said, some people don't even show symptoms at all. So in
Don't show symptoms for a long time, but if a person goes untreated, then their immune system is so damaged that they can get very sick very easily.
okay, so maybe that's the representation people keep going for, a person who didn't know for a very
Mhm.
long time. And so we're seeing like these extra sick individuals.
Yeah,
But
that's
then also,
very 80s and early 90s.
yeah, I feel like we aren't seeing what you're telling me, which is that people are living these full lives. Like, I feel like if we're going to
Hmm.
represent people on TV, we have to show that, not just these detrimental cases of people who didn't know, in time.
Yeah, and there are some people, like there are treatments today that's one, maybe even two pills, and that's it. And that's enough to keep a person completely healthy from HIV.
Again, another mind-blowing fact, because I honestly think people be chugging pills like, in
Hmm.
my ignorance, like you have to pop all of these pills at all these different times a day to
It used to
survive.
be
And
like that. It's not no more.
okay, cool. So we have advanced a lot.
It ain't been like that for many years now.
See, I'm backdated, honey. I am backdated. I don't
A lot of
I'm-
people in society are, you're right, that's the representation that we see, but that's so old, and there has been like a lack of updating. Like even U equals U, some people are just like, what do you mean? But that's not something that's particularly new to people who've been in the field for a long time. It's newer information released by the CDC, yes, but it's not being as promoted as it should be, so that people know, like, yes, HIV is still a problem, but we have some solutions and we know so much now.
Let's dive into a deeper part of
Mhm.
this topic. So many have tried to isolate this disease to the LGBTQIA plus community. From your knowledge and your activity in the community, is HIV/AIDS contracted in a very specific community, even if it's not LGBTQIA? Is there a very specific community that it's normally attracted to, like, or like, are those stigmas exist? Is there any truth to them? Just tell us if there's any truth to that.
That's the thing about stereotypes, is that they're not, it's not that they're necessarily untrue, they're just incomplete. And that is very incomplete. HIV was first found in gay men, and it was called many different things, called GRID, or gay related immunodeficiency. Some people called it gay cancer. There were all kinds of things that it was called, but HIV does not discriminate between your age, your race, your sex, your gender, your nationality. HIV is everywhere, and anyone can get HIV through a variety of activities. But HIV is still a big problem in the LGBT community, especially the G and B and T communities, um, because HIV HIV is still, when you think about the community and how small it is, and you think about communities of color, queer communities of color. So the pool of people to choose from, to interact with, to be with, to have sex with, the things that we do in our social interactions is smaller for people who are queer and black and male, to have sex with people who look like them. Um, because the pool is smaller, if one person in a pool of 200 has HIV, then that's 1 out of 200. But if the pool increases to 1,000 and one person has HIV, um, so that's really kind of what's going on, because the CDC did release that thing that said Black gay men have a 1 in 2 chance of contracting HIV in their lifetime. And that has to do with a lot of the ways, lifestyle choices. And I don't mean like gay as a lifestyle, but I mean like the way that you engage with people in your own community, where you're from, who you're around, who you get to interact with. Um, a lot of us, like if you are from specific neighborhoods, that neighborhood was your world. When you go to, like, if you're in high school, your first love or your crushes are usually going to be in that high school, because that's where you spend a lot of your time. Those are the people that you see and interact with. So HIV anyone can have HIV. Anyone can have HIV, and the rates a few years ago were going up exponentially for Black women getting HIV. and for Latina women. There are people who are cisgender women, I mean specifically, who get HIV through the same ways that other people who have gotten HIV can get HIV. So it's not one specific community that is affected. We're all affected.
I mean, you summed that up pretty well. I feel like I don't have to say anything. The answer is no, people. It's no. No, it is not limited and isolated to the LGBTQIA plus community. Anybody, no matter their sexual preference, can get it. And there are so many other variations that play a hand in
Hmm.
how it is passed, as AKeem mentioned before. I have a question. This is again, I don't know if this is more of a factual thing you could come from or just more of a moral standpoint. When you find out that you have HIV or AIDS, or maybe you've already been living with it and have known, should you tell your partner if you have HIV or AIDS? I saw this question on Instagram, and if there was a woman, she's like a sexologist, she was about to answer it, but I was like, no, I'm gonna wait and I'm gonna ask Akeem on the podcast, and then I'll watch hers later. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's a hot button topic because it's in many states it's not legal to not disclose your status as someone you're having sex with. It actually counts as felonious assault. Um, a lot of us in the HIV field think that these laws are a bit outdated, um, and that they need to be looked at because it just further serves to stigmatize people who are HIV positive. Um, into like, oh well, you must tell everyone, and there's no real standard of when is the right time to say this, how do I bring this up, et cetera, et cetera. It is, I think that if you are engaging in sexual activity with anyone, it would behoove you to communicate first. The best prevention method is communication, the best one. um i don't I don't really think that people have an obligation to disclose their entire life to you, when they're having sex, and they can control what information about themselves goes out. However, I think that part of communication is letting people know if you have any STI, and I mean one that isn't obviously cured. Like if you had gonorrhea 3 years ago, you don't have to tell me about that. But if you have any STI, communicating and having those open dialogues with your partner, I think is important, very important. But in many states in the United States, it is illegal not to disclose your status, or that person can press charges on you for felonious assault.
I think I agree with you, and I will be very transparent and say I was probably one of those people who like, of course you should tell you. Everybody should know. Which is, now that I'm thinking about it, it would be like wearing a T-shirt that says like I'm HIV positive, I'm AIDS positive,
Hmm.
which is so dumb. You know what I'm saying? And I do think that now I understand, with understanding more education about what HIV and AIDS is, and just everything about that community, it's really nobody's business unless you're, except for the person you're sleeping with. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like it's
There's no
very,
law that stops somebody from going and telling everybody that you have HIV, but there's a law that says you have to tell this person you're having HIV. So it's kind of like, well, if you don't say anything and then they find out, but if you do say something, then they tell people. It's like there are no repercussions for the other person and as we say in the community, not to spill your tea.
yeah, like that's not fair. It's 100% not fair. It results in a stigma being placed on that person. Just I'm trying to think of like another way to compare this, of something that's not about HIV and AIDS, but it's like, yeah, like it's none of nobody's business. For example, this is like, I hope it's not wrong to compare this, but like say somebody had like a felony or
Hmm.
whatever, and they got out of prison, they're trying to turn their life around, trying to do whatever they need to do to get a job. The only person who should be concerned is the next person that's going to employ them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everybody else, it ain't none of your business that I did some
Right.
time. You know what I mean? And so I was just trying to compare it to make it like every day so that people who aren't infected with HIV and AIDS don't feel
Hmm.
distant. This is a very, I think the way that I'm looking at it, a very personal um, situation. Like a lot of health things
Hmm.
are very personal. We don't run around
Yeah.
telling people. the moment we conceive our children, and you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, there
we
are
don't.
reasons that doctors' appointments are behind closed doors.
Yeah, it's so funny because I just feel like it almost feels that's yeah, something has to happen with the law. It almost feels like an attack or a sentence on
Yeah,
people who.
it, it's very stigmatizing. And I mean, if we look at the history of a lot of things, there's a lot of stigma and they're rooted in things that are pretty iniquitous, kind of like messed up stuff. Um, but that's one of those things that was just rooted in stigmatizing and isolating people with HIV.
Yeah, I'm for that. Let me know what petition I need to sign because I'll be signing it
Hey.
to get that changed around. So I have another question.
Mhm.
What should you do next if you find out your partner has HIV or AIDS? What if your friend has been diagnosed? How do you react emotionally? What should you do next as a person? Should you go research? Should you go to the doctor with them together? How do you allow yourself to feel more comfortable about it? And then again, this is like more of a moral question.
Mhm.
As a person who's engaged in the community, what have you, observed, and what do you think?
Um, the thing you help them. Just like if they discovered they had anything else, if you had a friend that discovered they had lung cancer, you wouldn't be like, "Ew, stay away from me. I don't want to get your cancer." If you had a friend who discovered they had diabetes, you you be there for them. You talk to them, and I absolutely encourage people to research and learn all the time, of course, by science-based reputable sites, because it's some bad information out there, but just be there for that person. One of the biggest killers in HIV is social isolation. People not feeling like the person that they were the day before. People either feeling like they have to isolate or being isolated by the social groups that they were once part of. And that leads to some really bad mental health outcomes. Reminding the person that you are still my same friend, lover that you were the day before, and that you have their back and y'all are going to get through it together, that can make a world of difference for someone's outcomes. And you see that in many illnesses, but especially in HIV, one that's so highly stigmatized, and people are are not constantly confronted with having to learn about that. Um, Definitely be there for them. I would say research. And learn how you both, if this is your partner, learn how you both can be safe. There is a pill that called PrEP, um, which is being developed to not just be a pill, by the way. The injections and the implants are coming, but you take this pill once a day and it lowers your risk of contracting HIV over 99%. So you can be protected that way. That's biomedical prevention. Using condoms is physical prevention. Other ways of having sex. Oral sex is very low risk sex. It's a much lower risk than having vaginal or anal sex. Um, there are many different ways that you can still engage with the person and make sure that they know that they are loved, cared for, and that you're there for them.
I'm glad you answered that question about oral anal sex because that definitely was on the list. Um, but yeah, you see, Akeem has it, honey. He is like, look, I didn't look at the list and I got you. I'm so thankful that you definitely mentioned that. I mean, again, it's just a nod to the fact that this isn't a life sentence. And I feel like slogan wise, I've heard that so many times. But
Mhm.
as I get more information, it's like, this is not a life sentence. Like I said, somebody can still have this whole full life, but I like the understanding of what can we do as people, because I think sometimes we don't feel like we have to take on any responsibility, or maybe our first thought is to get away from the person, isolate them from the community, the family, and it's like you do not have to do that. You don't have to turn this into a thing
Mhm.
where it's just like, what do I do now? Let me get away. It's like, no,
Yeah.
you can grow closer and walk through this with the person. I
It's not
also want to.
airborne.
Oh, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
It's
What'd you
not
say?
airborne. It's not a plague. You have to do very specific things in order to get HIV. Four specific things, actually. Um, Either sharing needles, so that's blood to blood, Having sex, specifically vaginal and anal sex, are much higher risk. Um, it can be vertical transmission or mother to child, which is a very low rate of transmission these days. Because mothers generally, if they are in care, in prenatal care, there are ways to prevent, and we're very efficient at preventing the spread of HIV from the mother to the child. It's less than 2% in the United States. Um, and blood transfusions, which before 1985, now blood transfusions are safer and they go through a lot of testing. The chance of you getting HIV through a blood transfusion is less than 0.1% because the blood is being tested, the person is being tested, and that also has its own stigma too. Like if you are a man who has sex with men, you can't donate blood. Um, Although that has been lifted in some places, it was still being worked out. People are still fighting that fight. But it's about, once it passes, it's about 3 years after before it goes into effect. So if you go and donate blood and they know that you have sex with men, or if you take PrEP, then they won't let you donate blood.
The lack of logicalness, is that a
Thank
word?
you. It's the assumption that all gay men must have HIV, which ain't true.
Yeah, it seems like it's coming from a place of prejudice more than it is a place of science and fact. Because, like you said, if they're
Hmm.
transfusions now, they're running tests on the blood before it ever even gets to the person. So, what's
Hmm.
the issue? Ooh,
Right.
yeah, sounds like prejudice.
I
I
just
would.
think that it's crazy that the mosquitoes are ahead of us. The mosquitoes don't care who blood they get, where it come from. If they land on you, I'm getting this blood and this is going to my babies. But not humans for some reason.
We're a little bit slow. We're catching up though, but I hope we get it. We got to get it together. So I have two more questions before we end the podcast today.
Yes.
I just want to say I know that you talked about personally and emotionally with a friend, family member, or lover who has AIDS or HIV, how to walk through that with them. What about a person who, like me, I do not know anybody like that, but I'm getting information. How can I be an ally to the HIV and AIDS community? And then lastly, what are some resources that our listeners can go to for more information on HIV and AIDS?
Okay, so being an ally to people who have HIV/AIDS is just like being an ally to any other human being. You know, you listen, you look for, you find them, you treat them like human beings. One of the things too is if someone tells you that and y'all are usually huggers, hug that person. You know, don't deprive that person of touch because you are not getting HIV by touching someone's skin. That's just not going to happen. Um, Also, I feel like it's important to mention that HIV is one of those virus. It needs a host. It can't survive. It survives less than 5 minutes outside of the body in the air. It survives less than 5 minutes. It can't be on a surface, and HIV doesn't go through skin unless there is an opening. So hug that person. Let that person know that you're there. One of the things you can do is either follow HIV blogs and Instagram social sites, like and share their post. Um, there are people who are positive who share loads of information, tons of personal information. There's one guy, I believe his name is Carlos Cruz, out in um, California. He's a big blogger on Instagram, and he's like, follow my swallow. And he always has, like, he posts his meds in all sorts of places that he's in. Like if he's traveling, he'll post it like on a wall in like Mexico, or he'll post it like on a spoon in a bowl of cereal. You know, like, it's, people are putting that information out there, and the more that we normalize and share it and just engage with them, um, not only does it reach further, but it also shows people that these are human beings whose life did not stop because they got a diagnosis. Um, you can also go to, I know our MetroHealth website, we have a really good quick one page about HIV, STIs in our clinics. Um, if you do know someone who is positive, then we have a resource called Positive Peers, which is like a social media app where you can make an avatar. You don't put yourself out there. You can engage with not only the providers, but you can engage with other people who have been diagnosed, and that's mostly for young people. I think you have to be about 18 to 30 to join that, and some exceptions, but um, that's where people can build community. Um, there are a lot of really good resources. There are a lot of resources, period. The main thing you want to be sure of is is this medically accurate and a reputable source? We do write a blog, and I've written quite a few blogs for our HIV prevention blog called Pop to Block. That's pop, the number two, block.org. And there are a bunch of blogs. There are some poems and art that came from a contest that we had. Some really good writers and artists who contributed to that. And there's also a direct link to connect you to me if you want to send me an email or shoot me a text and you have questions. So the thing is that if a person does sexual health, we love questions, and there ain't nothing. I used to teach high school students, ain't nothing I haven't heard, from vinegar and yogurt to where to what I do. There's nothing, no question I haven't heard. So feel free to ask questions. That's one of the number one ways to connect with someone who knows something, is ask them questions, because we got answers.
We have a lot of answers, and you have answered a wealth of questions today on the podcast and have given us a wealth of information. Like, I really feel like whoever listens to this has a basic understanding to not proceed with stigma. And that's what we want. We need you to at least have a basis, and then we can start moving into allyship, but get you a
Yeah.
basis, you know what I mean? So that you could just be aware of
Mhm.
people around you. Thank you, AKeem. Thank you
No
so,
problem.
so
This was
much.
great.
Yeah, I'm like way more chill than I was leading up to this. I was so nervous, but now I feel like when we have more medical experts on for the next couple of weeks, which we will, guys, so tune in. We also will have AKeem back towards the end to talk to us a little bit more, maybe about some more societal and social things concerning HIV and AIDS.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so I feel a lot more equipped. And I think that is like the basis of getting past stigma and fear. Just being
Mhm.
equipped with the knowledge allows you to move forward and not be just rude, ignorant, and just, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
not helpful during, an already complex situation and culture. So, I mean, thank you, AKeem.
No
Again, I
problem.
feel like I can say thank you like 10 times.
I mean, fear comes from stigma, comes from not knowing. And once you know and you learn things, you're like, oh, that's literally not as bad as I thought it was.
That's exactly how I'm feeling now. AKeem, before we leave, do you have any social media or anything that you want to plug so people can kind of follow you and what you do? AKeem is an amazing spoken word artist, by the way. Amazing.
Sure. I am Keemy Jam, KeeMyJam on Instagram, where you can see some of my writing prompts, some of my poetry, and other things up there. If you are interested in learning more about Pop to Block, or you want to see some real cool, like we have an Instagram, a Twitter, and a Facebook, and a website, and that's Pop to Block, Pop the number two, and Block. If you want to go to the website, that's poptoblock.org. Um, where we post things. Sometimes we have Instagram takeovers, or you can send in questions and we answer them live. All sorts of things to engage on there. So please, I know that most of us are on Insta now, so please join us on Instagram.
Thank you so much. We love an artist, activist, ally, okay? And that is what AKeem is. That's 4 A's. Artist, activist, ally, AKeem.
Akeem. I feel like Moesha. Oh.
And that's what we do on Art of Me, guys. We are all about just educating you guys, not only on film and culture and expressing yourself through video and media, but also just understanding, hey, other cultures, other communities. How can we help them? How can we express their lives on film and media? Guys, this has been an amazing, amazing episode. I'm going to say thank you, AKeem, one last time.
You're
I promise.
welcome.
I
All
promise
the
that's the
time.
yeah. Okay, cool. I promise that's the final time. Thank you guys so much. And please stay tuned for our next episode where we will be meeting with person who is in the medical career and will talk to us a little bit more about HIV and AIDS prevention. That's our next episode. Don't forget to connect with us on our social medias on Instagram and Facebook at artofme.org, our website, www.artofme.org. And if you like this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe. Share it on your social media, share it in your WhatsApp, your family inbox, your friends' inboxes. Share, because it really helps us get views. It helps other people be educated on what we're talking about. And it just helps us as an organization. Guys, thank you so much. And I'll see you on the next episode. Bye.
Bye.